Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey back to ancient Babylon, a place where, for one whole month, the sun disappears entirely from the sky. Imagine that, 30 days without a single ray of sunlight. It sounds almost like a nightmare, right? A pitch black world where time seems to stretch on endlessly. You probably won't survive this, but hey, let's find out together how the Babylonians managed to live through it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far and wide these journeys travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in ancient Babylon, a city known for its grand architecture, vibrant culture, and advanced knowledge. But tonight, you're not here for the bustling markets or the majestic ziggurats. Tonight, it's about something much darker, something that, for one month every year, turned this thriving civilization into a land of eerie, unnatural stillness. A whole month without sunlight. It's almost hard to imagine, right? A sunless existence stretching across the horizon, leaving the people of Babylon to survive on their wits and resilience. Now, you're not in a tiny village with just a handful of people trying to make do. No, Babylon is a sprawling metropolis, full of life, trade, and culture. But that doesn't matter when the sun vanishes from the sky. Time stretches. The seasons blur. Your sense of reality starts to fray. With each passing day, your world becomes a little darker, and you can't help but wonder, how does a civilization as advanced as Babylon survive such an unthinkable event? That isn't just a freak natural occurrence. It's a cycle, a regular event. Every year, without fail, the sun sinks lower and lower until for one full month, it completely disappears. And it wasn't just something the Babylonians could ignore or take lightly. It was deeply ingrained in their understanding of time, the cosmos, and their very survival. Historians still argue over whether the Babylonians fully understood the cause of this phenomenon. Was it a natural cycle, a celestial alignment, or perhaps a divine curse sent by the gods? Regardless of its cause, the people of Babylon had a deep connection with the rhythms of nature and the stars above them. They'd been dealing with the absence of sunlight for generations. But the real question is, how did they manage to get through it? As you walk through the dimly lit streets, the shadows of towering structures loom over you. It's like the very fabric of the city has shifted, become quieter, slower. People move around you, but there's a certain stillness in their faces, a resigned acceptance that this darkness is a part of life. You'll soon learn that it wasn't just a matter of adjusting your daily routine. It was a matter of adjusting everything, from the food they ate, to the way they prayed, to how they spent every minute of the day. And so, as you step deeper into this dark world, remember one thing. It's not just about surviving the absence of sunlight. It's about finding a way to live in a world that's not entirely your own. But first, we have to understand exactly how this cycle of darkness works and how the Babylonians managed to keep their city and their spirits alive through the longest month of their lives. The sun, that great fiery ball of light, is something we often take for granted. We wake up to it every day, and it sets each night, predictable, reliable. But in ancient Babylon, this wasn't the case. Here, there were days when the sun wasn't just absent for a few hours. It was gone entirely, stretched out for weeks, sometimes a full month. Can you imagine what that would be like? A city built on sunlight, now plunged into an abyss of darkness. People would have needed to do everything differently, from the time they woke up to when they ate, to the very way they prayed. This dark period wasn't a temporary eclipse, like the ones we experience today. No, this was a true, extended absence of light, and it was so embedded in the culture and calendars of the Babylonians that they knew when it was coming. Historians still argue about the exact cause. Was it a regular astronomical event, a rare alignment of celestial bodies that caused the sun to hide behind the earth or another heavenly body? Or perhaps, as some more spiritual thinkers suggest, the Babylonians viewed the sun's disappearance as the result of the god's displeasure, a celestial trial for the people. Whatever the reason, the Babylonians had learned to cope. And just like any culture with a deep understanding of the cosmos, they built their lives around these celestial patterns. In the months leading up to the long darkness, the people would prepare, adjusting their routines and activities to anticipate the lack of light. It became a part of their yearly rhythm. But that didn't make it easy. The darkness was something they had to navigate carefully. Imagine walking through the streets of Babylon as the days grow shorter and the shadows longer. The markets, which are usually alive with the bustle of traders and travelers, seem quieter. People begin to withdraw into their homes more often, waiting for the time when sunlight will return. They know the sun won't stay away forever, but this stretch of unending night can still be unnerving, especially if you're used to the constant presence of daylight. The Babylonians, however, found a way to deal with this. They didn't let the absence of sunlight paralyze them. Instead, they turned to their rich religious and cultural practices to weather the storm. In times like this, religion was the guiding force. Babylonians were deeply spiritual, with gods who ruled over every aspect of life. from the harvest to the heavens themselves. When the sun disappeared, people believed the gods were sending a message, and they'd respond with rituals, prayers, and sacrifices to regain favor. The disappearance of the sun became a test of faith. Could they remain devout, patient, and hopeful in the face of this challenge? And more importantly, could they find a way to maintain their livelihoods, especially when it came to something as essential as food? As you walk the city, you begin to notice the subtle shifts in the behavior of the people. The once vibrant marketplaces now feature offerings of incense, ceremonial bread, and clay figurines dedicated to the gods. You hear whispers in the air, prayers muttered under breath, as people brace for the full weight of the darkness. The priests are particularly busy during this period, leading the populace in elaborate ceremonies that involve prayers, chants, and sacrifices aimed at soothing the gods. This wasn't just about asking for the sun's return. It was also about reaffirming the strength of Babylonian culture and belief in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. Historians still argue over whether the Babylonians truly understood the astronomical mechanics behind this darkness, or whether they believed it to be purely divine. But one thing is clear: they believed that through their rituals and devotion, they could influence the forces at play. Their connection to the gods was so vital that they could not afford to take it lightly. These moments of darkness, while unsettling, were also opportunities to demonstrate their devotion and their understanding of the delicate balance between nature and the divine. Now, just as the rituals brought a sense of spiritual continuity, the absence of sunlight also had very practical consequences. With no natural light to guide their day, the Babylonians had to rely on other forms of illumination. They used oil lamps, torches, and other sources of light to keep their homes and temples illuminated. But that's not the only way they adapted. The longer this period of darkness stretched on, the more creative they had to get. At this point, you begin to see more people huddling inside their homes, making sure they have enough supplies to get through the long nights ahead. The darkness means more than just an absence of sunlight. It changes how people structure their time. You can imagine how unsettling it must have been to live in a city where the distinction between night and day became so blurred. This wasn't just about adjusting to less light. It was about adapting to a way of life that was shaped by an almost constant night. As the month drags on, you realize that the sun's absence isn't just something you wait for to end. It shapes everything: how you work, how you sleep, how you eat, and even how you think. Babylon's survival through this month of darkness wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about mental and spiritual resilience, too. And that's a theme that will continue to echo throughout the story of how they survived this strange and difficult time. The sun may have been gone, but for the Babylonians, the rhythm of life didn't come to a complete halt. In fact, as you stand in the heart of this ancient city, surrounded by the dim glow of oil lamps flickering in the homes and temples, you start to see how they clung to their religion and rituals in ways that provided both structure and comfort during this long period of darkness. The gods were always watching, and the absence of sunlight was a clear sign that they needed to be appeased. The people of Babylon understood that their survival depended not only on physical resilience, but also on maintaining the divine favor. It's hard to overstate just how central religion was in the lives of these ancient people. Babylon was a city where the divine didn't just hover in the background. It was the very fabric of daily life. The gods were seen as rulers of every aspect of the cosmos, from the heavens to the earth beneath their feet. To the Babylonians, the disappearance of the sun didn't just mark a change in the weather, it marked a cosmic shift. And, as with any cosmic event, it required their attention. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians believed the sun's disappearance was a test of their devotion, or if it was an actual punishment from the gods. What we do know is that they saw this event as a spiritual challenge. It wasn't enough to simply endure the darkness. They needed to prove themselves worthy of the sun's return. How? Through elaborate rituals and prayers to the gods, specifically to Shamash, the god of the sun, who was their divine protector. It was believed that Shamash would hear their pleas and bring light back to the world, but only if they followed the proper rites. So, as you walk through the streets, you'll see many people heading to the temples. There, the priests are busy performing rituals to Shamash and the other gods. Sacrifices are offered. Incense burns thick in the air, and chants fill the darkened atmosphere, invoking the gods to return the sun. These ceremonies were not mere acts of religious devotion. They were also deeply tied to the daily survival of Babylon. The Babylonians knew that without the sun, there was no harvest, no growth, and no future. The darkness was a constant reminder that survival depended not just on the physical, but also on the divine. The rituals, though, were not limited to the temples. The Babylonians were a people who carried their spirituality with them in every aspect of their lives. Even in their homes, small altars and idols to the gods were common. Families would gather around these altars, lighting candles or lamps to mimic the absent sun, offering prayers of thanks, seeking protection, and hoping for guidance. Every meal, every conversation, every interaction was framed by the belief that the gods were watching and waiting for the right moment to return the light. But not all the gods were worshipped in the same way. Shamash may have been the god of the sun, but other deities, like Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, were also involved in these ceremonies. People would pray to Ishtar for protection from the dangers that came with the darkness, whether that was from wild animals, disease, or famine. It was an intricate web of divine forces, each one playing a part in the delicate balance that kept Babylon functioning. One thing you'll quickly notice as you witness these rituals is that they weren't just about begging for the sun's return. They were about affirming the Babylonians' place in the world and reminding themselves that despite the darkness, they were not alone. Their gods were with them, if only they could prove their worth. And for many, that meant engaging in acts of charity, helping neighbors, or providing for the less fortunate during this difficult time. It's important to understand that the Babylonians didn't just survive the darkness through prayer and rituals. They also thrived by maintaining a sense of community and cooperation. As the days wore on, they pulled together, sharing what little food they had, protecting one another from the harsh realities of an unrelenting night. This solidarity was a crucial part of Babylonian life, even outside of the religious context. The month without sunlight wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a community-wide challenge that required everyone to pitch in, to help each other survive until the light returned. You might imagine that during such a time, the Babylonians would have experienced feelings of despair, frustration, or even fear. It's a natural reaction when you're faced with a month-long stretch of darkness, with no certainty of when or if the sun will ever return. Yet somehow, through their faith, their rituals, and their tight-knit community, the Babylonians managed to push through. They didn't just sit idly by waiting for the sun. They actively participated in a cultural system that encouraged resilience and endurance. Now, as you stand in this darkened city, you realize something important. The Babylonians didn't see darkness as a void. To them, it was part of a cycle, a necessary part of the cosmic order. Just as day always follows night, the sun would eventually return. But it was only by performing their rituals, reaffirming their devotion, and coming together as a community that they could make that return happen. The darkness was not just an obstacle to endure. It was a part of a larger narrative, one in which the people of Babylon played a crucial role in ensuring the sun would rise again. As the ceremonies wind down and the people return to their homes, you can't help but feel the weight of their belief. This wasn't just about surviving a month without sunlight. It was about surviving in a world that felt out of their control. Through faith and cooperation, the Babylonians managed to navigate the darkness, trusting that their efforts would bring the light back. The Babylonians had their rituals, their prayers, and their unwavering belief that the gods would return the light to their world. But there was another critical aspect of survival during this dark month: food. The absence of sunlight didn't just affect the sky, it affected the crops, the foundation of Babylonian life. Without the sun, the plants would wither and food stores would deplete. The city was built on the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, but even this advantage wasn't enough to guarantee survival when the sun disappeared for weeks. So, what did the Babylonians do? You find yourself walking through the market district, but it's not the lively chaos you'd expect from a bustling city like Babylon. Instead, the air is filled with a sense of quiet tension. People are bartering, exchanging what little food they have left: dried grains, salted fish, and whatever preserved produce they could manage before the sun's disappearance. The food that was meant to last them for the month of darkness was running low, and you sense that there's an underlying urgency in every transaction. The usual abundance of fresh produce is replaced by jars of honey, dried dates, and wheat cakes, foods that can be stored for long periods and don't rely on sunlight for preservation. Historians still argue over exactly how the Babylonians handled agriculture during this time. One theory suggests that they relied on storage methods and preservation techniques like drying and salting to make the most of the food they harvested before the sun's disappearance. The grains and fruits they had gathered before the darkness would keep them fed, but those supplies wouldn't last forever. The real question was, could the Babylonians manage to grow crops during the period of no sunlight? That's where their ingenuity came in. The Babylonians were not only skilled farmers, they were also incredibly resourceful. To keep the agricultural system running, even during the darkest times, they turned to alternative methods. You notice the clever designs of the irrigation systems that crisscross the land. The rivers may not have been enough to feed the crops during the month of darkness, but the Babylonians had figured out ways to divert water to the fields and keep their crops growing even with minimal sunlight. The irrigation system was an engineering marvel, a testament to the knowledge and skill of the Babylonian people. The Babylonians also made use of what little light they could gather, adapting their farming methods to suit the conditions. It's said that some farmers would plant certain crops that were more resilient to low light conditions, though historians debate just how effective this approach truly was. Some even speculate that they might have turned to subterranean farming techniques, growing crops in shaded or underground spaces where the light could be controlled or filtered. The innovation didn't stop there, though. In the homes, the Babylonians also found ways to stretch what little food they had left. The use of small, enclosed cooking spaces helped retain heat and preserve whatever warmth was left in the air. They would prepare hearty stews utilizing the last of their vegetables, meats, and grains to create meals that would keep them going. You can almost feel the warmth of the fires in the homes, the scent of slow-cooked meals filling the air as families gather around to eat, even as the outside world remains in the grip of eternal night. The ingenuity didn't just stop with food storage and cooking, though. Babylonian cuisine during this time also had to adapt. Meals were often simple, focusing on ingredients that could be preserved and kept for long periods. Dates, figs, olives, and barley were staples that could be easily stored and relied upon to provide sustenance. Even the wealthy couldn't afford to waste food, and everyone would have been forced to economize and make the most of their available resources. But the real challenge came when their stores began to run low. The Babylonians would have had to rely on their neighboring regions for trade. The market, which had slowed down in the early days of darkness, now started to pulse again with activity. The merchants and traders, who had once looked to the skies for a sign of the sun's return, were now gathering what they could, exchanging goods from the fertile lands along the rivers, hoping to make it through to the end of the month without facing the consequences of a barren crop. The barter system became more vital than ever. Bartering not only kept the economy alive, but also kept the people connected, reminding them that even in the darkest of times, cooperation and trade would see them through. This period of darkness also gave rise to a kind of food hierarchy in Babylon. The wealthier citizens had enough reserves of food to last them longer, while the poorer classes often found themselves relying on the generosity of others. It wasn't just a time of physical hardship. It was a time that revealed the inequalities in Babylonian society. Those who had access to more resources were able to weather the month without sunlight with less stress, while others found it much more difficult to get by. Still, the sense of community held strong, and neighbors helped one another, sharing whatever they could to make sure no one went hungry. As the month wore on, the need for food became even more urgent. You begin to sense that the once bustling Babylonian markets have transformed into places of quiet negotiation and desperate bartering. Those who still have food to spare are sought after with great urgency. The Babylonians are starting to feel the full weight of the absence of sunlight. Their ingenuity in managing food stores, however, gives them hope that they can make it through, even if it feels like the darkness might never end. In the end, it's a reminder that no matter how advanced a society becomes, survival always comes down to the basics. Food, water, and shelter are the foundation of everything else. And the Babylonians, just like us, had to find creative ways to adapt to the harshest of conditions. Their ability to adjust, preserve, and share what they had was a testament to their resilience. And as the darkness begins to linger, you know that their survival won't just depend on the return of the sun. It will depend on the strength of their community, their cleverness, and their refusal to give up. As the month wears on, the darkness grows more oppressive. The once familiar cycle of day and night has faded into a blur, and with each passing day, you can feel the weight of the never-ending night pressing down on the city. But the Babylonians weren't just sitting idly by, waiting for the sun to return. No, they had to adapt. The absence of sunlight wasn't just a temporary inconvenience. It was a challenge that affected every part of their lives, and they had to find ways to live, to work, to survive. The absence of the sun meant that people had to completely rearrange their daily routines, altering everything from when they woke up to how they measured time. Walking through the streets of Babylon, you notice that things don't feel the same anymore. The shops and markets are still there, but their hours have shifted. The usual rhythm of the day, people waking up with the rising sun, working through the day, and resting at night, has been completely upended. Without the sun to guide them, the Babylonians have had to turn to artificial means of measuring time, relying on other markers to tell them when to work, when to rest, and when to eat. It's a little unnerving, and you can sense the disorientation in the air. People's circadian rhythms have been completely thrown off. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians had a fully developed system of artificial timekeeping during the dark month, or whether they relied more heavily on the lunar cycles to guide their schedules. Some believe that the absence of the sun led to a greater reliance on the moon and the stars to mark time. The moon's phases could have acted as a natural timepiece, helping the people of Babylon organize their lives despite the lack of sunlight. Others argue that the Babylonians may have used more rudimentary methods, like counting hours through candle burning, or water clocks, or even relying on the sounds around them, nocturnal creatures, the winds, or the rhythm of the city itself. You start to realize just how important these shifts in timekeeping must have been. Without sunlight to guide you, it becomes almost impossible to know when the day begins or ends. You're used to the sun rising, giving you that natural cue to get up and start your day. But when there is no sun, no natural light to break the darkness, the world feels suspended, and people struggle to maintain any kind of structure. And yet, despite the confusion, life carries on. The Babylonians find ways to make it through, 1 hour at a time. In homes across the city, the Babylonians begin to adjust their routines. They light candles or small oil lamps that flicker and provide warmth. Though the light is faint, the glow in the homes is soft and dim, casting long shadows across the walls. It's not ideal, but it's the best they can do. Families are forced to become more resourceful, finding ways to occupy themselves during the long nights. Storytelling becomes a staple of Babylonian culture during this period. Without the distractions of the outside world, no daylight, no markets bustling with activity, people gather together in the warmth of their homes, telling stories of their gods, of past triumphs, of wisdom passed down from generation to generation. It's easy to imagine how these gatherings, once small and intimate, could have taken on greater importance during the dark month. With so much of the world outside the home plunged into uncertainty, these stories must have provided a much needed sense of comfort and connection. It wasn't just about passing time, it was about preserving cultural identity, about maintaining a sense of continuity, even when the world felt like it was on pause. But there's more to those nighttime rituals than just filling the empty hours. The Babylonians were a deeply religious people, and their spirituality wasn't just confined to their temples. It permeated everything they did, from their work to their leisure activities. As the nights stretched on, the people turned to their gods even more, seeking reassurance, asking for divine guidance to navigate the darkness. It wasn't just the priests in the temples who were active during this time. Ordinary people, from the wealthiest traders to the humblest farmers, would have continued offering prayers and sacrifices to the gods to ensure that the sun would return. As you walk through the streets, you come across a small family gathered around an altar in their home, offering incense and small offerings of bread and dates to Shamash, the sun god. The dim glow of their oil lamp casts long shadows on their faces, but there's a sense of peace in their ritual. Despite the overwhelming darkness outside, inside this home, the family finds solace in their faith. It's a reminder that in Babylon, spirituality wasn't just a set of rituals. It was the very fabric of life itself, guiding them through every challenge, even a month-long absence of sunlight. And it wasn't just the rituals that provided comfort. It was the strong sense of community that the Babylonians had cultivated. During the darkness, people relied on one another more than ever. The absence of the sun brought the city closer together. Neighbors helped each other out, sharing food, providing shelter, and offering support. Babylon's sense of unity and interconnectedness became more pronounced during this time, as people worked together to get through the long, dark month. You realize that, as strange and unsettling as this darkness might seem to you now, for the Babylonians, it was just another part of their world, a world where the cycle of day and night wasn't always what it seemed, and where the gods' favor was something that had to be constantly sought and maintained. The absence of the sun, though challenging, wasn't an insurmountable obstacle. It was a test of faith, resilience, and the strength of community. Despite the deep sense of disorientation that comes with living in a world without sunlight, the Babylonians persevere. They adjust their schedules, find new ways to pass the time, and continue to worship the gods that guide their lives. Their ability to adapt to the darkness is a testament to their resilience, and it's a reminder that even in the most difficult of circumstances, survival is possible as long as you have faith in the gods, in your community, and in your ability to persevere. The deep, unyielding darkness has stretched on for what feels like forever, and yet life in Babylon continues. As the days blend together in a monotonous stretch of night, the city's architectural marvels, its towering ziggurats, its grand palaces, its shining temples, become symbols of a steadfast city determined to survive whatever cosmic trials are thrown its way. Babylon's monumental buildings aren't just structures, they're embodiments of the resilience and endurance of the people. And during this long stretch of darkness, these buildings took on new significance. You make your way toward one of Babylon's most famous landmarks, the Ziggurat of Etemenanki, an awe-inspiring tower that reached toward the heavens. As you approach it, you're struck by the way it seems to loom larger in the darkness, a beacon of both physical and spiritual strength. The ziggurat, though originally a place of worship, was also an architectural feat designed to endure, to stand tall against the forces of nature. And during this long month of darkness, it was more than just a temple. It was a place of refuge, a place where people came to seek comfort and direction, both physically and spiritually. The Babylonians weren't just surviving the dark, they were making the most of it. Their architecture, with its vast, towering structures, became a kind of psychological comfort in times of distress. The city's buildings, especially the ziggurats, offered more than shelter. They provided a sense of connection to the divine. When the people could no longer rely on the natural world to orient them, these monumental structures stood firm, offering a physical manifestation of stability. It's easy to imagine how, during this time, Babylon's grand buildings would have taken on an even deeper significance. The temples dedicated to gods like Marduk and Shamash would have been places where the Babylonians could focus their prayers and sacrifices, seeking the divine favor that would restore light to their world. You can almost hear the chants and prayers echoing through the stone walls, reverberating off the carvings that depict gods and kings alike. For the Babylonians, these sacred spaces were more than just places of worship. They were sanctuaries that provided peace and a sense of order in a world that had been upended by the absence of sunlight. The priests who tended to these temples were more important than ever. Their role was to maintain the connection between the gods and the people. They were the intermediaries, the ones who offered sacrifices, led the prayers and ensured that the rituals were performed correctly. The absence of the sun only heightened the sense of urgency around their duties. The people knew that, without the proper rituals, they might never see the light again. It's clear that the Babylonians placed great faith in their religious practices, but their reliance on the architecture of their cities was also vital. The temples, ziggurats, and even the homes of the wealthier citizens were often equipped with open courtyards and prayer rooms designed to preserve whatever faint light there was. The use of oil lamps, torches, and fire pits inside these sacred spaces created a faint golden glow, an echo of the sunlight they so desperately needed. The architecture wasn't just functional, it was symbolic, offering both practical shelter and spiritual reassurance during the dark days. As you wander through the city, you notice how the shadows of these buildings seem to grow longer in the absence of the sun, and yet their presence offers a sense of calm. The ziggurats stand tall, their stepped levels rising higher into the night sky, a testament to the ambition and ingenuity of Babylonian builders. But more than just feats of engineering, these structures provided psychological solace. In the midst of the overwhelming darkness, these towering symbols of divine connection stood as a reminder to the people of Babylon that they were still grounded in something greater. Of course, the larger structures weren't the only ones offering comfort during this time. In the homes of the Babylonians, the design of buildings also played a crucial role. Many homes, particularly those of the wealthier citizens, were built with courtyards in the center. These courtyards were open spaces where families could gather around small fires or oil lamps, providing warmth and light to counter the dark that pressed in from every direction. The way the homes were structured, often with high, thick walls and small windows, meant that even in the darkest of times, the inhabitants could feel insulated from the outside world, protected from the oppressive night. Even the smaller temples and shrines scattered throughout the city contributed to this sense of divine protection. The Babylonians believed that these spaces, though not as grand as the ziggurats, were still sacred. They were tucked away in quieter corners of the city, offering a sense of peace and stillness. You can almost imagine the way these intimate, quieter spaces would have drawn in those seeking solace, their prayers softly spoken as they offered their hopes for the return of the sun. But it wasn't just the architecture that helped the Babylonians survive the darkness. It was the very act of coming together as a community. The shared rituals, the communal prayers, and the unspoken understanding that they were all in this together kept Babylon thriving despite the challenges of living without sunlight. Even as the shadows stretched longer and the days blurred together, the Babylonians found comfort in their shared spaces, whether in grand temples or simple homes. The darkness, it seems, brought the people closer, giving them a sense of unity in the face of an overwhelming challenge. Historians still argue over the exact role that Babylonian architecture played in coping with the darkness. Did it merely provide physical shelter, or did it also serve a deeper psychological function during these long nights? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. What we do know is that the Babylonians had a profound understanding of how their built environment could influence both their physical well-being and their emotional resilience. Their temples, ziggurats, and homes weren't just places of refuge. They were the anchors that kept the people grounded in the face of uncertainty, a reminder that no matter how dark it got outside, there was always a place of light, both physical and spiritual, within their city. As the long days without sunlight press on, there's one place where you can still feel the pulse of life: Babylon's markets. Even in the face of this overwhelming darkness, trade and commerce haven't stopped. The markets may not be as bustling as they once were, but the exchange of goods continues, and you begin to see how the absence of sunlight has shaped the way business is conducted. The air is thick with the smell of spices, dried meats, and the faintest trace of incense. There's a softness to the atmosphere as the usual daylight hours are replaced by the glow of oil lamps and torches. The traders, who would once have relied on the sun's arrival to guide their day, have adapted. Now they work with a quiet urgency. Instead of the usual rush of shoppers haggling over fresh produce, the exchanges are slower, more deliberate. Some merchants have taken to bartering goods that can withstand the darkness: preserved foodstuffs, dried meats, and jars of honey. Others have turned their attention to rare luxuries that are harder to come by without sunlight: gems, metals, and delicate fabrics. The more you walk through the market, the more you realize how much the absence of sunlight has influenced what's being sold. The fresh produce you'd expect in a bustling market is scarce. There are no ripe fruits, no bright vegetables, just dried goods, grains, and preserved items. It's a world of scarcity, but one in which the Babylonians have learned to adapt. The wealthier traders are still able to barter their rare goods, but for many, it's about survival. You notice how people are treating the act of buying and selling differently, too. There's a sense of quiet desperation, but also of ingenuity. The barter system, once a simple exchange, has become a way to ensure that everyone gets what they need. Historians still argue about how much Babylonian trade was affected by the absence of sunlight. Some believe that the dark month had a dramatic impact on the city's economy, while others argue that Babylon's merchants were skilled enough to adapt quickly, allowing trade to continue almost without interruption. But one thing is clear: the market is more than just a place for exchange. It's also a symbol of Babylon's ability to endure, even when faced with what seems like an insurmountable challenge. As you watch a merchant exchange dried figs for a handful of barley, you see how the system is working. The smaller, more practical items are in high demand, but there's still a place for luxury items. The wealthy citizens of Babylon are still able to acquire rare goods, even in the darkest times. Yet, the market also serves a greater purpose. It's a place where the community comes together, where people share resources, and where connections are made. Even in the absence of sunlight, the market remains a vital part of Babylonian life. You might wonder what the traders themselves are thinking. They've spent their lives building up relationships, honing their craft, and making a living by selling goods under the sun's bright rays. But now, with the sun hidden away, they have to rely on different methods to measure time, to guide their trading hours, and to manage their businesses. Many of them are relying on oil lamps and water clocks to keep track of the days, a reminder of how much the darkness has changed the way Babylon functions. As the day shifts into evening, you notice that the market takes on a different rhythm. The once busy thoroughfares are quieter now, with fewer people shopping. The flickering light of lamps casts long shadows over the stalls, and it's clear that people are beginning to settle in for the night. But the market hasn't closed. It's simply shifted. The focus has moved from fresh produce and daily needs to more long-lasting goods. The people are still bartering, still trading, but it's a slower pace now. The night has settled in, and even in the market, people are adjusting to the new realities of a sunless world. Walking past one of the stalls, you overhear a conversation between two traders, one of whom is trying to sell jars of honey and the other offering dried fish. They speak of the sun's return, of when the darkness will finally lift. There's hope in their voices, but also a deep uncertainty. It's clear that, despite the daily grind, there's still an overwhelming sense of waiting. They are waiting for the light to come back, just like everyone else. It's fascinating to see how the absence of sunlight has affected not just the physical aspects of life, but the mental and emotional responses of the people. The Babylonians haven't given up. They've adapted. The market, which was once a place of abundance, has now become a place of quiet survival. But it is survival, nonetheless. And that's something the Babylonians are experts at. The darkness hasn't broken them. It's forced them to be more creative, more resourceful, and more determined than ever before. The markets continue, and as you walk through them, you can feel the pulse of Babylon. It's slower now, but still beating strong. The trade may have changed, but the spirit of the people remains the same. Despite the challenges of living in a sunless world, The Babylonians know how to keep going. The city might be blanketed in darkness, but the strength of its people and their ability to adapt shines through. The markets of Babylon might have kept the economy moving, but when the sun disappears for a month, no aspect of life goes untouched. For a society that prided itself on its intellectual prowess, its vast libraries, and its renowned scribes, the sudden and prolonged darkness raised an entirely new set of challenges. The Babylonians were known for their intricate, cuneiform script, their ability to preserve knowledge, and their meticulous record keeping. Yet, in the absence of sunlight, even something as fundamental as their writing would need to be adapted to this new, shadowy world. You walk through the city, passing by a quiet study hall where scribes sit at their desks, their small oil lamps illuminating the papyrus scrolls spread before them. The steady scratch of reed pens against clay tablets fills the air, a comforting reminder that even in the face of the darkness, the Babylonians still valued knowledge. But the task they're undertaking isn't just about recording history. It's about ensuring that culture and wisdom don't get lost in the long, dark stretch of days. In many ways, it's their writing that has kept Babylon grounded in the face of the unknown. Their cuneiform script was used not just for trade or legal matters, but for everything that kept Babylon alive. Prayers, astronomical records, literature, and treaties. Without the written word, Babylon might have lost touch with itself. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians faced any real decline in intellectual output during these dark periods. Some believe that the absence of natural light may have disrupted the scribes' work, forcing them to adjust to new ways of creating and preserving knowledge. After all, the hours of daylight no longer served as a reliable marker for when the workday started or ended. Scribes may have had to rely on artificial light for longer periods, working well into the night, keeping their oil lamps burning as they copied the stories of the gods, the king's decrees, and records of past events. It's easy to imagine how difficult it must have been to focus under the dim flicker of a small flame. For scribes who were used to working during the daylight hours, the adjustment would have been immense. Their meticulous craft, which relied on precision and clarity, was now being carried out under less than ideal conditions. Yet, despite these challenges, the scribes didn't stop. Instead, they adapted, using whatever resources they had to ensure that their writing would survive. You can almost hear the scribes' quiet murmurs as they work. Their faces are etched with concentration, the slight glow of their oil lamps casting shadows over their scrolls and tablets. The darkness outside may feel overwhelming, but in here there is purpose. It's the scribe's work that will outlast the night. They're writing not just for the present, but for future generations, recording knowledge that will one day help others understand Babylon's story. Their work becomes a quiet act of defiance against the encroaching dark, a statement that even though the sun may be gone, Babylon's intellectual legacy will endure. In the study halls and libraries, the Babylonians continue their efforts to preserve their understanding of the world. Their records of the stars, their calendars, their laws, all of it is meticulously documented. Their astronomical knowledge, which had already been advanced before the darkness fell, becomes even more important. The scribes record the phases of the moon, the movement of planets, and any celestial patterns that might help them predict when the sun will return. For the Babylonians, the stars weren't just a point of fascination. They were a vital part of the cosmic order, and understanding them was crucial for survival. Even though the sun had vanished, they still looked to the heavens, tracking the movements of celestial bodies as though they could somehow call the sun back from its mysterious disappearance. But it wasn't just the scribes who were feeling the strain of the darkness. For many in Babylon, the absence of sunlight would have felt like a kind of psychological weight. With no natural light to guide the day, how did the Babylonians structure their lives? How did they cope with the unrelenting night? You can imagine the long, sleepless nights where people lay awake in their homes, staring up at the ceilings, wondering when the sun would return. The darkness wasn't just a physical absence, it was an emotional and mental burden. Historians still debate the psychological effects of living without sunlight for such long periods. Some believe that the Babylonians may have experienced a kind of collective anxiety, a growing sense of dread as the days without sunlight stretched on. Others argue that the Babylonians, accustomed to cycles of nature, simply saw the darkness as a natural phenomenon that would eventually pass. But the truth is likely somewhere in between. The darkness would have been disorienting and unsettling, forcing the Babylonians to confront the unknown. But their faith, their rituals, and their dedication to preserving knowledge would have helped them stay grounded. As you continue through the city, you realize that the scribe's role extends beyond mere documentation. They are also cultural preservers. Their work is an anchor in the storm of uncertainty. They are not just writing the laws of the land or keeping track of trade transactions. They are creating a lasting record of Babylon's identity. In the face of cosmic confusion, their words will carry Babylon's legacy forward. You come to a library, the shelves lined with clay tablets and scrolls. Here, the written word is not just a tool of survival, it's a lifeline. The dark month may have caused chaos, confusion, and disorientation, but the scribes have made sure that Babylon's wisdom, culture, and history won't be lost to the darkness. It's in this quiet place of learning that you realize the true power of the written word. Even in a world without sunlight, the Babylonians are finding ways to light the way forward. As the darkness stretches on, and the scribes continue to document Babylon's past and present, the psychological effects of living in a world without sunlight begin to take a toll. The long days of shadow play tricks on the mind. The Babylonians were a resilient people, but even they couldn't entirely escape the toll of living in a sunless world. The fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of when or if the sun would ever return, began to gnaw at the edges of their psyche. As you walk through the dim streets, you notice the change in the faces of the people. There's a kind of quiet intensity, a look of determination, mixed with the weight of weariness. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians experienced any psychological trauma during the month without sunlight. Some suggest that the darkness led to a collective sense of anxiety, while others argue that the Babylonians had developed coping mechanisms so ingrained in their culture and faith that they could weather the mental strain with relative ease. But as you move through the city, it becomes clear that the darkness, even though they had adapted to it in many ways, is still a heavy burden. The absence of sunlight disrupts not just their schedules or their agriculture, but their very sense of time and reality. You can imagine how, in the early days of darkness, the people of Babylon might have held on to hope. They clung to their rituals, to their faith in the gods, and their belief that the sun would eventually return. But as the days dragged on, as the nights grew longer, the weight of waiting began to sink in. What if the sun didn't return? What if this dark world was their new reality? And then there were the children. It's one thing for the adults who have spent years learning how to live in harmony with the cycles of nature, to face the darkness with quiet resilience. But for the younger generations, born into a world where sunlight was once a constant companion, the absence of the sun would have been a far greater shock. The children of Babylon might have wandered the streets, confused by the seemingly endless night, their natural sense of time disrupted by the lack of light. Parents would have done their best to comfort their children, reassuring them that the sun would eventually return. But it's impossible not to imagine the fear that must have bubbled up in their hearts. In homes, the psychological strain of the darkness was felt most acutely at night. There's an oppressive stillness that fills the air as the city settles into its nocturnal rhythm. The dim glow of lamps becomes a poor substitute for the warm, natural light that people once took for granted. People start to sleep less, perhaps out of restlessness, perhaps out of a subconscious need to stay awake, alert, in case the sun somehow reappears in the middle of the night. The lack of sleep, the stress, the fear of the unknown all combine to create a heightened sense of anxiety. In the homes, the flickering oil lamps are the only constant companions. Families huddle together in the warmth of these small flames, but the absence of natural light disrupts their sense of day and night. Without the sun's gentle cue to rise in the morning and rest in the evening, the line between work and sleep begins to blur. The Babylonians would have needed to find ways to maintain their mental health, to keep their spirits from sinking into despair. But the mental toll of the darkness wasn't just an individual experience. It affected the community as a whole. In a city that was built on trade, agriculture, and constant activity, the stillness brought on by the lack of sunlight was deeply unsettling. As you walk through the city, you notice fewer people in the streets. The once bustling marketplace now feels almost deserted, save for a few traders and desperate barters. The vibrancy that normally characterizes a growing civilization has dimmed, both physically and emotionally. The Babylonians are doing their best to keep things going, but you can feel the collective exhaustion, the sense that, even though they have adapted in so many ways, this darkness is still a force that looms over them. Historians are still debating how Babylonian society handled the mental toll of the darkness. Did they experience a kind of collective depression, a loss of motivation as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months? Or did the unity of their faith and community help them to push through, even when the darkness seemed never ending? One thing is certain: the Babylonians were a resilient people, but this period of unrelenting darkness tested even their resolve. And yet, through all of this, there was one constant: the sun's eventual return. Despite all the fear, the anxiety, and the uncertainty, there was an unshakable belief that the sun would come back. The Babylonians didn't have a choice but to hold on to that hope, to trust that the cycles of nature would restore balance to their world. The rituals, the prayers, the sacrifices, they were all aimed at this one ultimate goal: to see the sun once more. As the darkness drags on, you find yourself reflecting on the way the Babylonians endured, not just physically, but mentally. They adapted their schedules, their agricultural practices, their markets, and yet none of it would have been enough without their unwavering belief that the sun would rise again. It's a belief that transcends the physical world, a testament to their faith in something greater. And as much as the darkness affected their everyday lives, it's this belief that kept them going. It was a light that never truly left, even in the deepest of shadows. The month without sunlight is drawing to a close, and the tension in the air is palpable. The Babylonians have been living in the shadow of uncertainty for what feels like an eternity. Yet there's a quiet sense of anticipation beginning to build. Through the darkness, they've endured, adapted, and trusted that the sun would return. They've made it through the rituals, the sleepless nights, the difficult trade, and the deep psychological toll. And now, in the hushed moments before the dawn, there's a feeling that the cycle is about to shift once more. You stand in the heart of Babylon, feeling the heavy silence of the final days. The city has been waiting for this moment for weeks, months. The priests, the scribes, the traders, the families, they all share the same hope, the same unspoken question. When will the sun return? As you walk through the city, you notice a shift in the energy of the people. The faces that were once shadowed by uncertainty now seem more expectant, as though the entire city is holding its breath. People have learned to live in darkness, but that doesn't mean they've stopped yearning for the light. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians believed the sun's return would be immediate or gradual. Some suggest they anticipated the slow return of light, the gradual stretching of daylight hours as the sun began to rise again, while others believe they expected an instant reversal, with the sky suddenly bursting into light after what had felt like a never-ending night. Whatever the expectation, the moment of the sun's return would be nothing short of a spiritual and emotional rebirth for the people of Babylon. The priests, as always, have been the guiding force throughout this period. As you make your way toward one of the grand temples, you see the familiar figures of the priests preparing for the final ritual, a grand ceremony to welcome the sun back. The air is thick with incense, the scent of offerings, and the murmurs of prayers. This isn't just a physical event, it's the culmination of everything the Babylonians have endured. The rituals, the sacrifices, the prayers, they were all leading up to this moment, a moment of renewal. As the sun finally begins to rise, there's a collective sense of relief that sweeps over the city. The first rays of light break through the dark sky, casting long shadows on the ground, but also illuminating the faces of the people. There's a hush as the light grows stronger, gradually chasing away the darkness. It's as if the world itself has exhaled, and for the first time in what feels like ages, the people of Babylon can breathe easy. The sun is back, and with it comes the promise of life, of growth, and of a return to normalcy. The people, once burdened by the weight of uncertainty, now stand together, grateful for the light that will guide them forward. In the markets, you hear the sounds of traders returning to their stalls, exchanging goods, and engaging in their usual banter. The city is awakening once more, but this time it's different. The absence of sunlight has left its mark, but so has the resilience of the people. The market feels more alive than ever, filled with a renewed energy as the Babylonians celebrate the return of the sun. There's a sense of unity in the air as people greet each other, their faces now lit by the warm glow of daylight. The city that had once felt heavy with the weight of darkness is now bathed in light, and with it comes the possibility of new beginnings. But the return of the sun isn't just a physical event, it's a spiritual one as well. The priests lead the people in a great ceremony of thanksgiving, offering thanks to the gods for returning the light and restoring balance to the world. You can hear the chanting, the rhythmic sound of drums, and the prayers that rise up toward the heavens. The city is alive with gratitude as people come together to reaffirm their faith, their connection to the divine, and their belief in the cosmic order. It's a powerful moment, a reminder that no matter how dark things may get, the sun will always rise again. For the Babylonians, the return of the sun is more than just a return to normal. It's a symbol of rebirth, of renewal. They've survived the darkness, and now they can begin again. The darkness may have tested them, but it has also strengthened their bond as a community and deepened their faith in the divine. As you watch the sun rise higher in the sky, you realize that this period of darkness, though difficult, was not just a trial. It was a part of the cycle of life. And now that the sun has returned, Babylon is once again bathed in light, ready to move forward. The return of the sun marks the end of this chapter in Babylonian life, but it also serves as a reminder of the resilience, the strength, and the faith that carried the people through the darkness. They have faced the unknown, adapted to the absence of light, and emerged stronger on the other side. And as the sun rises higher, bringing warmth and light back to the world, the Babylonians know that they have survived, not just physically, but spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. The darkness, while long and challenging, has ultimately made them stronger. And now, as the sun fills the sky once more, they are ready to begin anew.